For example, my husband, we were newlyweds really when this happened. We weren't married quite a year at that stage, coming up to a year. But for him, for example, he married a very independent woman, and within the space of a few hours, I was completely dependent on him for everything, to stand up, to use the bathroom, to move an inch. I mean, he had to do everything, the stuff that a newlywed husband shouldn't have to do. So all the little mechanics of standing up from the wheelchair, Dave had to physically lift me up, and taking down my trousers, for example, I couldn't do it. I didn't have the stability in my body to even bend down.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
It's Bill from recoveryafterstroke.com. This is episode 131, and my guest today is Ruth Carroll. Ruth had to give up her independence as a result of an ischemic stroke caused by a brain tumor just one day after the birth of her son in 2017. Ruth Carroll, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill.
So is it Ruth or Ruthie?
It's Ruth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Instagram has Ruthie, and sometimes I don't know whether the Instagram name is the real name or not the real name.
Yeah, of course. No, it's Ruth.
But tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
So yeah, in 2017, April the 1st, actually, April Fool's Day, in 2017, I suffered a stroke. I was 9 months pregnant initially with my first baby, and in my 9th month, I just started to get some swelling in my right eye, excuse me, and my pupil became quite dilated. So I went to Specsavers to get that checked out, and I was advised to go into A&E to get an MRI scan. So of course I did that, and I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It's called a meningioma. So we very quickly had to have a C-section to get my baby out. So my little baby boy Bobby was born on the 31st of March 2017. So he was perfectly healthy, thank God. The very next day then, it was less than 24 hours. It wasn't quite a full 24 hours. I was back in his ward visiting him, and that's where I suffered an ischemic stroke, essentially because of the pregnancy hormones. It grew my tumor very quickly, and tumor growth blocked the blood flow to the brain, and that's what caused the stroke. So I was left side paralyzed.
That's too much for a new mom, a new
Yeah.
baby. That's just too much. That's not supposed to happen, is it?
No, not at all. It was a crazy time.
How do you how do you manage the emotions that are related to that? Because there's this amazing, beautiful reason to be happy and joyful, and then there's this other stuff that's happening. What do you do? Like, how do you manage?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't think my mind allowed me to take in the seriousness of it. I just went, obviously, I was very emotional, very upset. My family were distraught, but I just went day by day. My world was the hospital bed that I was in, the nurses who were taking care of me, the doctors coming and going. And that's all that I was able to focus on. I couldn't really stand back and think, oh my God, I've just had a newborn baby. I'm paralyzed. I can't move. I wasn't able to take in all of the trauma that was happening. I just kind of let it go over my head, really, and just survived day by day.
It seems a common thing when I've interviewed people who have had multiple uh, life events happen at the same time as their stroke. It really is just let it pass through to the keeper and don't worry about everything at once, because it's impossible. Also, stroke survivors are not sometimes capable of creating those types of worries and connections because the brain has been switched off or is partially not working, or there's other stuff going on.
Exactly.
Who took care of the baby?
My my husband, poor Dave, my husband, I mean, he'd never held a newborn baby, never changed a nappy, so it was very traumatic for him as well as me and everyone else. But we live next door to my in-laws, so Dave's parents live next door, and they were a great support. They took in Bobby for a couple of months, I think, maybe 2 or 3 months. So Dave was able to go back and forth and be with Bobby. So that was a huge help and a huge relief for me as well, obviously, knowing that he was being taken care of so well.
Did you
So
have
we were
any
lucky.
challenges connecting with your baby? Because they talk about those first few moments are really important, and then the next few months are extremely important for mum and baby to connect. Did you find later on any of those issues reflecting back on your connection with your baby?
Yeah, I was lucky it didn't impact our relationship, but when I kind of stand back and look at everything that happened, it was the hardest part to deal with because Bobby was 7 months old when I came home from hospital. So I essentially had missed the first 7 months of his life, which, is obviously very upsetting. But a lot of consultants in hospital, I saw a few neuropsychologists, I think, had said to me, look, it's probably likely that you will suffer from postnatal depression after such a trauma the day after birth. So I think everyone was expecting that to hit. But luckily, thank God that never happened. I think it was the support that I had from family and friends, everyone. I was just surrounded with love and support. My Bobby was brought into me every single day in hospital. So I did get to hold him. I had him on my chest, and that helped. Even though, to be honest, I was out of it half the time and I was very fatigued. So it wasn't a lot of engagement with him, but still.
I get cranky when people tell me what's going to happen to me, when doctors trying to predict the future and all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
They never normally try to predict the future in a positive light. They always try to predict the future in a negative light. What's it like for you to hear that at that point in time? And did you pay attention to it? And then reflecting on it now, what are your thoughts on these predictions that doctors make?
I can see why they made that prediction. Now that I'm so much stronger, I often find myself looking back going, oh my God, I can't believe that happened to me. And I can see how someone would slip into that postnatal depression. But I can see why, but I completely agree with you in terms of doctors focusing more on the negatives than the positives. One experience I had, Bill, when I was in a rehab hospital here, my left arm is still non-functioning. The hand is completely paralyzed, but I am getting some movement back in the arm. But I did have a physiotherapist actually sit me down and say, Ruth, you'll never ever get movement back in this upper limb. You need to just go away and learn to live life one handed for the rest of your life. You need to understand that. I mean, it was heartbreaking at the time when I was told that. And looking back now, I'm like, you know, a positive slant would have been so much better. You know, for example, Ruth, there's hope, work hard and you'll get this arm back. I can't understand why they focus on the negatives so much.
I in hospital, I put a lot of doctors in their place, especially when they spoke to me in this kind of way. If a physiotherapist told me to do that, I would have reported that person to their superior, and I
Mhm.
would have told their superior that this person is not worth the salt, not worth their
Mhm.
salt. They're not worth having in an organization that's supposed to encourage people to be rehabilitated and set an expectation of a long road forward. Fine. Set an expectation of very small gains and maybe no gains for a few months and maybe no gains for a few. Set all those expectations, but never create the expectation that something is not going to get better. I just think that's the most terrible thing that somebody who's helping is supposed to do. And if any one of those types of people are listening, whether there's a doctor or a nurse or a physiotherapist listening now, it is not your job to try and predict the future for your patient. It's your job to help them right now.
Absolutely. But sure, no, but nobody can predict. The brain is so complex and so plastic as well, the whole neuroplasticity side of the brain. I mean, nobody, no matter how amazing or educated they are, they can't predict what each person's individual brain is going, how they're going to react to the paralysis, whatever the trauma was.
And the
So,
thing about it is, what do they base their their response on, or that answer on? I know that they're in their job and they see lots of things, but they don't have the data for every single person's version of their stroke and the
mhm,
outcomes. So instead of just going based on, I don't know, their version of the world, I think they just need to take a breath and just stop before they speak and just smile and encourage rather than the opposite. But look, I don't blame them, but it really frustrates me, and I don't
yeah.
I don't take it to heart anymore. But I could see how people would, and then also set themselves up for failure.
Hmm. Absolutely, because it demotivated me for quite a long time. I found myself, before she said those words to me, I was like, right, let's go. Let's work hard on physio every single day. And then those words were said to me, and I found myself going, oh, why bother getting up early in the morning, and trying to work hard if there's no hope. So really, it's a really awful thing to do to someone.
Yeah,
Mm.
I going through the stroke journey that I've been through. At some point, I stop and reflect on what my experience is doing to the people around me. And it's fair to say that the people around me were losing their shit while I was going through my stroke experience. How's your stroke affected the people around you?
Did I think it's actually worse for the people, for friends and family a lot of the time than it was for me. Because as I said just there earlier, a lot of the time, especially in the acute stage of stroke recovery, I had no awareness of what was going on, or when I was in ICU and I was just out of it. It's fine for me to just lie there while medics take care of me. But I mean, my family were there watching all of that. They were completely distraught. So it impacts so many people. For example, my husband, we were newlyweds really when this happened. We weren't married quite a year at that stage, coming up to a year. But for him, for example, he married a very independent woman, and within the space of a few hours, I was completely dependent on him for everything, to stand up, to use the bathroom, to move an inch. I mean, he had to do everything, the stuff that a newlywed husband shouldn't have to do. So I mean, it's had a huge impact on his life. My parents have to give me a lot more support now than they ever would have had to, so it impacts a lot of people.
With regards to using the bathroom, forgive me for asking, but for the lot
Mm.
or just to get you there?
Oh, for everything. I mean, I was so bad I couldn't hold my upper body up. I was just bent over to the left, absolutely zero movement, so we had to get a commode into the sitting room in the house because there was no physical way that I could get out of the wheelchair and sidestep into our downstairs toilet, which is quite small. So all the little mechanics of standing up from the wheelchair, Dave had to physically lift me up, and taking down my trousers, for example, I couldn't do it. I didn't have the stability in my body to even bend down.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
So nothing, absolutely nothing was possible to do on my own. So he did have to step up and do everything.
That's dramatic. And I
Mm,
I remember being out of, I think it was out of surgery and being in hospital and needing to go to the toilet, but the nurses weren't answering my buzzer,
hmm
and I couldn't walk. I couldn't use my left side at that point in time. I hadn't been to rehabilitation yet. I was waiting to get to rehab, and I was using a wheelchair, and they weren't coming. And I needed to go because they'd given me laxatives
mm,
after surgery to get the bowels moving and working and everything
mhm.
running again. And the laxatives kicked in, and there was nobody there.
Oh,
So I
God.
dragged myself with my right side of my body into the wheelchair to start pushing myself towards the toilet, which was maybe 5 meters away. And
Yeah,
by
it's
the time I
dangerous.
got to the toilet, the nurse came and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm
Mm,
trying to get to the toilet because these laxatives have kicked in and I need to get there. Let's not talk about it. Let's just get me there."
exactly.
They finally got me there. And when they got me there, they wanted to stand inside the room while I did my business.
Mm,
And I said to them, "No, you can't. Please, you can't do that. You need to get out." And they wouldn't
mm,
get out for safety reasons. And I was having
yeah,
an argument with these people, amazing nurses, at the toilet. And eventually I convinced them to go. I told them, "I promise I won't move. I won't get up. I won't try and do anything. I just need you to get out." Because I couldn't imagine what it would be like for me to have them in there while I was doing my business. Not to mention, what do you talk to somebody when they're watching you in the toilet?
I know it's awful. I've been through all of that. I just found I had to switch off, and really not focus on the fact that, there could be a male nurse standing next to me while I was on the loo chatting about the weather. I mean, embarrassing stuff, but it was just, it was reality. There was no other way. I wouldn't have been able to be left alone. I would just flip over to the left-hand side of me on the floor.
Totally understand. What have you spoken to your husband about those times? Have you guys reflected on that time?
Mhm. Yeah, he mocks me. He'd always say, "You owe me big time." We can look back and laugh about it now, but at the time it was upsetting. But yeah, it's funny now.
How old were you both at the time when this all happened?
I was 33.
Yeah.
Dave was 30, maybe 38, 30, 39.
Did you both
Yeah.
take vows that said something like "in sickness and in health" and all that kind
hmm
of stuff?
Yeah, we did. So yeah, we really stuck to that.
Poor guy, he never knew what he was getting himself into when he said those vows.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, I'm very lucky to have him now. He's great. Very supportive.
Sounds like you guys are going to get through this difficult time. Where are you at with the diagnosis and with what was discovered in your brain?
Yeah, so they basically discovered it was called a grade 1 meningioma tumor, sorry, which is actually, my neurosurgeon said to me if he had to pick a tumor to get, that would be the one he would pick. It's not a very dangerous tumor itself. Not that anyone would be picking that, but the problem for me was the location of the tumor. It was wrapped around my optic nerve behind the right eye, and it was going right through the internal carotid artery, which is a very dangerous and very important artery to supply blood to the brain. So the location of it was a big problem. So there was a lot of conversation between my family, myself, and our neurosurgeon, and he kind of bounced ideas and procedures with other neurosurgeons, not just in Ireland, but in Europe and America. I think he said he went as far as. So it was a lot of discussion about that before the surgery took place. So I had a craniotomy then in April 2017, and that removed the tumor. Pretty much, it removed about 98 point something percent of the tumor. I still do have little crumbs left, but they're luckily fine. They just have to be monitored every 6 months
Yeah.
to make sure they don't grow.
How do you how's your emotional state leading up to that next appointment? Do you find yourself being cool, calm, and collected about it, or do you have a different experience?
When those MRI scans are coming up every 6 months, I'm nervous. My neurosurgeon is a great guy, Dr. McNally, as in he's really relaxed and casual. Like the last time I went in, you're waiting there and he comes in, hi. And I'm like, no, no chit chat, just say it. How is everything? And he's like, it's fine, everything's fine, there's no problems. He's really relaxed about it. And, he said to me the last time, Ruth, if those crumbs were going to grow, you're looking at 10, 15 years for those crumbs to grow. So, he was like, I wouldn't worry about it. We'll just keep an eye on it. So he's a very relaxed kind of person, which helps to relax me. But yeah, quite nervous though coming up to it, just in case, you know.
How do you enjoy being in the tube of the MRI scanner?
Do you know what? Initially, I hated it, the noise, and I was quite panicked. But now I have had so many,
Yeah.
it doesn't phase me at all. The last two scans that I had, I actually fell asleep. I was coming out and I was woken up to Ruth, tap, tap, tap. I was like, oh, that was quick. I mean, they were laughing at me going, it's not often people fall asleep. I actually found the noise quite relaxing.
It's
But I'm a pro now. I've done so many of them.
interesting. How many do you reckon you've done?
Oh, like I don't know. I was in about four different hospitals here in Dublin in Ireland. Oh, I mean, I don't know, 50
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, I honestly spent my time being transferred from my ward or my room to the MRI or CT scanner, back and forth, back and forth. I felt I was doing that every few days.
yeah, that's quite the record. I reckon that would be up there. I think I've done maybe over the 5 or 6 years that I was getting scanned. I think I'd probably done at least, I'd say maybe 15, something like that. And by the end of it, I was doing the same thing. And because you can choose your own music, I was choosing
Yeah,
meditation kind of music. So I'd go in there and meditate,
mm,
and that would get me through very quickly and make it feel like it went fast. And
yeah,
also, that was really, it was almost putting me to sleep. But I've got to say, that's awesome what you've been able to achieve. I've never felt
yeah.
asleep.
And I did have one scan and I came out and there was two guys and a girl and they were giggling when I came out. And they were like, that was some good singing, Ruth. I was like, what? They were like, obviously they can hear everything through the speakers. I didn't realize I was singing away. That was a bit embarrassing.
Yeah. I found you on Instagram, where is
Mm,
the most amazing place where I find all my guests
mhm.
and other people who would discuss things that are stroke related. It's become kind of a community of a lot of familiar faces and new faces coming in and out.
Yeah,
How long have you been on Instagram, and why did you choose to get on there and
yeah.
do what you're doing?
I joined Instagram, I think it was last summer sometime. And before that, I was absolutely clueless when it came to social media. I did have a Facebook page, and when I was traveling, I'd throw up pictures more for my family and friends to see. But I just wasn't clued into the world of social media, and I had no interest in it really until all my friends and everyone I knew started going on it. So someone said it to me, a friend of mine said, you should talk about your stroke experience. there could be someone out there who you might help. So then I was like, I like that idea instead of just posting, when I go out for dinner, what I eat and all that kind of stuff. I thought, there was a reason why I should do it. So I just set it up last summer and it is amazing. There's a whole community of people out there who have had strokes, like young people. I'm really enjoying Instagram, I must say. The amount of messages I get from people if I post a video, positive and well, no negative comments really, but people looking for further information, and it's great. It's a good feeling to be able to help someone. A lot of people, would come on to me going, "Oh, I never knew that you could do that exercise for your arm, for example." So it's nice to share what knowledge I have.
Yeah.
So I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it was selfish when I started this whole journey. It was selfish. It was about me. And I quickly realized it wasn't really about me. It was about other people and
Mm,
doing it. And what I say was about me was I found that as a way, expressing myself made me, ease the burden and get things off my chest. And then I just found that it started helping other people. And then that completely changed the type of, uh, the, the, the type of satisfaction that I was getting from posting. It
yeah,
was a twofold. It was a two-way path. It wasn't just me getting things off my chest and making it about me. And the other part of it is the more addictive part of it. It's when somebody says thank you or I needed to hear that or asks another question.
yeah.
That is something I can't stop doing because I never knew that what I had to share was important enough for other people to hear.
To connect with. Yeah, I'm the exact same. I remember a moment I was in a hospital called St. James's Hospital here in Dublin, and I was in the stroke ward. It was quite early days. And I just remember I was turned on my right hand side, probably like you, I needed three nurses or healthcare assistants to actually turn me on the right hand side while protecting my subluxed shoulder. But I just remember lying there and I had my phone up to my face and I was thinking, I thought I was the only person in the world at 33 years of age who has had a stroke. And I typed into YouTube, I just said, young stroke survivor girl. And a video came up of this girl. She was 33 as well when she had her stroke. A beautiful girl with long brown hair. And she came onto the camera, and she started talking. She was normal, she was happy. And she was like, look, this is awful what happened, but it's not the end of the world. And then the next video from her was her walking in the park with her mum. And I can't explain to you the hope that that gave me. I was just so happy to see that and so hopeful. So I often think, if there's some girl or guy out there in the hospital bed, if they could see me on Instagram, doing well and just, to be able to help them, the thought of that is amazing.
That's the
So
point of this podcast. It's the point of it is there's 100 and you're going to be 131 episode, and that's the point of it. The point is that to have, I'm not sure if it gets to 1,000, but 1,000 ways that people can find other stroke survivors who are post-stroke at some point, and they can just say, "This is how far I've come," even though I've got all these dramas and problems and things that haven't been resolved yet. I'm
there's
still,
still life after stroke.
yeah, I'm still
Mm,
doing stuff. I'm still on an interview. I'm still meeting people. I'm still getting back to work. I'm still recovering. All those things. I mean, it's so
absolutely.
important. Your mindset in hospital, was it doom and gloom? And if it was, that's fair enough. Is how would you have described your mindset when you're in that really early stage of recovery?
It was doom and gloom, and it was fear was my main feeling. I was just so afraid. Like firstly, I couldn't get my head around the fact that I was paralyzed. It was just such a crazy thing to me, looking at my body and trying to move it and not being able to. So it was a lot of tears, a lot of crying. I was completely in shock, as was my family. But I'm strong. My mindset is stronger than I thought. I had and still luckily have a lot of motivation and drive. I was the type of patient who, was saying, I want more physio. Come on, can I have another OT session? Bring it on. I don't want to just lie here in the bed. So I was driven. I was like that before the stroke hit as well, in terms of work and my personal life. So that stood to me,
What
luckily.
kind of work did you do?
I worked in marketing as a brand manager for McDonald's. I was there for 10 years.
Yeah.
So it was a busy, stressful, fast-paced job. In a way, this brain injury was one of the best things that happened because I'm no longer working. I've been advised not to work for a good few years. So I'm enjoying this new way of living, stress free, and I'm getting great quality family time in that I know I wouldn't have got if I was still stuck in that crazy world of stress and work. So there is a positive in every negative situation. I've learned that. It's just about making yourself focus more on the positive than the negative.
Yeah. And give yourself enough time to see the positive as well, because sometimes it's hard to see it when you're in that acute, tough
Mm,
stage.
yeah.
It's interesting that lockdown has been similar for me in that, again, when we were in COVID lockdown here in Australia, in Victoria, we were locked down for 6 months solid. We had nightly curfews. We weren't allowed to work almost under any circumstances.
Yeah.
We had nowhere to go, nothing to do. We weren't allowed to meet with people anywhere. And it's Australia, being an island, has been able to really um, maintain its ability to decrease the number of cases of COVID through these really severe lockdowns, which people hated and I hated. But as a result of that, we've come to that point where there are very few daily cases and almost no cases from community transmission. And I was going through that lockdown at one stage thinking, this reminds me of my stroke recovery. When I came home from hospital and my wife went back to work and my kids went back to school, I was alone at home doing not much most
Yeah.
of the day. And that was a really good time for me because when they came home, the noise was too much for me to handle. Uh,
Mm,
the busyness was too much for me to handle. So
yeah.
my brain really needed recharge time. I needed to not be overwhelmed so that I could manage for the 3 or 4 hours before bed and before dinner and all that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of things do you have to deal with now that are related to the stroke that you have to pay attention to and be careful of?
Yeah, so for me, it's mainly physical. The I can walk independently now, but for a long time I needed a cane and I was in a wheelchair for a long time. It's my left arm and hand that is my main physical disability, really. Cognitively, I was quite lucky that I wasn't too impaired. I suppose in the early days, like you mentioned there, Bill, my brain was very sensitive to noise and to distraction. I remember I was being wheeled down to the patient canteen in one hospital, and there was definitely over 100 people in the canteen eating, the noise of the cutlery, people walking past. And I mean, I had to scream to say, get me out. It was so overwhelming. My brain just couldn't deal with it. Even, if I was sitting in my wheelchair and someone walked past, it was like, wow, it made me dizzy and it made me feel sick. Everything was just so overwhelming in those early days. But naturally, that just seemed to improve over time, thankfully. But I had problems initially with concentrating. I found it hard to concentrate for a long period of time. I could be having a conversation and I might just kind of switch off, but that's improved as well. But my main issue from this whole brain injury is fatigue. This neuro fatigue I find really, really difficult. From day one, it's been my biggest struggle. And now, 4 years on, it's still my biggest struggle. It's it's crippling is the word I would use. I mean, it impacts every minute of every day. But I'm learning to tackle it better. I've come up with a few strategies to make life a bit easier. Like, I have to plan out my day now. Even before you and I spoke today, as the most recent example, I went out for a walk with my husband and son in the park, and we went to the playground. There was a lot of people there, talking and catching up with a lot of people. But I knew that I had to do that early on in the day so I could come home and relax and go up and get my 40-minute nap. And then I'd have the energy to sit here and talk with you. But, if, for example, I had done that a couple of hours ago, I would find it very hard to sit here and engage with you. So I just have to be smart, and I have to plan out the day. I have to plan in my naps. So I do get at least one 40-minute nap in. And once I can lie down and switch off the brain, I'm energized then, which is great.
Yeah,
But
that will be very familiar to a lot of people listening. And the fatigue, to me, although it was debilitating, it was one of the hardest things I had to put up with as well,
mm,
was a really good way. It was something that taught me to pay attention to my body for the first time, and to listen and to respond, not only just know that I'm about to get tired, but to also respond and do something about it.
yeah,
I did all the same things that you say that you do, which is plan my day. And we would have some plans for the weekend with my wife, and I'd say, listen, don't make any plans for tomorrow because I don't know if I'm going to be up to all the things that
yeah,
you want to do. And that was about me. Don't make plans for me. And then I would wake up that Saturday morning, and I said to her, remember that thing that I said yesterday about make no plans? I'm feeling great. Let's go for it.
yeah. You just never know. I mean, the days that I should be exhausted, let's say I went out for dinner with friends for 4 or 5 hours talking, and you'd think the next day, next morning, I'd be exhausted. I could be bursting with energy, and vice versa. When I should be alert, I mean, I could be just on the floor with exhaustion. It's really hard to figure out fatigue. I find you just never know when it's going to hit, and it can just hit like that. I could be absolutely fine 1 minute, and the next minute I would struggle to hold my head up myself. It would just take so much energy to do that.
Yeah.
It's and people don't see how difficult fatigue is,
One of
you
the
know.
things one of the things that I found that was making my fatigue worse was my thyroid function.
Mm,
The neurological fatigue that occurs from a thyroid gland that is not working optimally is exactly the same as neurological fatigue after they opened my head. And
wow.
I developed a thyroid condition a few years um, before my brain issue, and it
Mhm.
was an ongoing issue after the brain surgery. And we hadn't done anything about the thyroid because I was still fresh from a brain injury. And I got to
Mhm.
the point where I didn't know that my thyroid was causing the neurological fatigue. I thought it was related to my head, until I went and
Yeah,
saw an endocrinologist who said, by now, the fatigue that you're experiencing is more likely related to your thyroid challenges rather than your head challenges. So one little tip that may or may not have anything to do with what you're going through is for
mhm,
people listening is to get their thyroid checked out just as a general thing. Go to the
yeah,
doctor, get some blood tests, get a urine test. That's the best way to get the thyroid checked out, because sometimes
mhm,
if the thyroid is underactive, um, and it's under duress, or you're not consuming enough iodine, sometimes what happens is, um, the brain the brain needs more resources than it used to get us through the day, and it's
gotcha. Yeah.
going everywhere. It's going everywhere to try and get resources, and if the thyroid's not working optimally, it might struggle a little bit. So maybe there's
That's
nothing to that.
interesting. Yeah, I never heard of that. That could really be another problem that definitely contributes to my fatigue is anti-seizure medication that I've had to start taking. I developed focal epilepsy after my craniotomy just due to a tiny scar that was left on my brain following the surgery. So as a result of that, I have to be on, and I will have to be on for the rest of my life, anti-seizure medication. The first medication that I was on was called Keppra, and that the main side effect of that, and supposedly every anti-seizure medication is fatigue.
Right.
I had to come off Keppra. I mean, it was I couldn't function. I couldn't get through the day fatigue wise on that. So I did switch over to another one that I'm currently on called Lamictal. And I did see a slight improvement initially, but then it got bad again. It was back and forth. But my neurosurgeon said to me, what one time I was talking about the different strategies I was putting in place for fatigue. And he said to me, Ruth, at the end of the day, your brain is damaged as a result of the stroke and the tumor. You know, no matter how many good strategies you have in place, you are going to have neuro fatigue until that brain fully recovers.
Yeah, great
So,
advice.
mm,
And I feel like my fatigue is mostly gone, but then it still comes. I'm 9 years post my first stroke, and brain surgery was in 2014. So I'm nearly, uh, I'm beyond 6 years after brain surgery. And I
okay.
have those days where I'm having a great day, and then the wall just turns up out of nowhere. I hit that wall,
Yeah,
and then it's just tools down, and there's nowhere to go or do anything, and it's just relax and rest, go to bed early, and then hopefully wake up the next day feeling better. But some days, if I don't get a good night's sleep, then the struggle lasts 2 or 3 days. And I'm
mm,
supposed to be online every 2 or 3 days doing things, and if I go quiet, I go quiet. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm not concerned about it. I just go quiet and gather myself, and then I get back to doing what I have to do.
yeah. And some people handle fatigue better. What I mean by that is, my family, for example, they are well educated on neuro fatigue. And, they'll know, if I go home down to south of Ireland, where I'm from, County Cork, my parents and my sisters will say to me, okay, we'll do this, we'll go shopping, we'll go see the nieces and nephews, do everything that I love to do. But you go home, you sleep, and then we'll do this. So they get it and they encourage it.
Yeah.
But I find other people don't understand it and are kind of like, why aren't you coming here? Why aren't you doing that? And why do you need to go home and rest? It's other people's understanding of it is different, I find, in my experience as well.
It's just ignorance, and not in a negative, bad way. Like they're ignorant about fatigue and stroke, and why would they know about fatigue and stroke? Fair enough.
Mhm.
Better that
Yeah.
they don't ever know what that's like. But if they want to be less ignorant, they can just read a little bit about it. Someone just do a Google search, and you'll find enough information to explain
Mhm.
what neurological fatigue is. Lights used to make my fatigue terrible. If I'm sitting on the couch, watching some TV, I cannot have the lights over my head because
Mm.
it just makes me suffer. I can't do it. It hurts me, my brain, and
Yeah,
people don't understand when you explain to them that my brain is hurting. How is it hurting? How is that even
I
possible?
know.
But it does hurt. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's like a physical pain almost. With me, I find people with different energy affects my fatigue. You might come across a bit like you now, Bill. You seem, we don't know each other very well, but a relaxed kind of person. But there's some people out there who are hyper and want a lot of energy from you. How are you? Tell me what you did yesterday. Give me all the detail and the information. They're happy, loud, bubbly people. But I find that exceptionally draining. So I'm more comfortable hanging out with chilled out, kind of not quieter people, but people who don't demand as much energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I know exactly what you mean. And those
Mm.
people are I call them the woo woo people, the ones that just go nuts and they go off all the time. And they're
Yeah.
lovely. They're lovely, but in short
Mm.
doses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have to learn to walk away and switch the brain off, and come back refreshed then.
Yeah. How
Mm.
is how do you manage now coping with running around after a toddler?
Yeah, it comes back to support again. I'm lucky we have a childminder who helps to drop Bobby, my little boy, to school, and she collects him afterwards and brings him home to me a bit later in the afternoon. So that allows me time to get to my physiotherapy, my hydrotherapy, and I do my home exercises here, and I'll get my nap in so I'm ready for him when he comes in. And that makes such a difference. If I didn't have those few hours to prepare and to get my work done and to get out and get a walk in, fresh air helps with fatigue as well. So it can be difficult at times, and it makes me feel guilty a lot of the time because if I didn't have this neuro fatigue to be battling every day, I would be engaging with my son a lot more, doing more things with him. A lot of the time I have to almost not ignore him, but not engage with him as much as I'd like to, so that I can survive until the evening, until my husband is home, so there's that battle to deal with as well.
Most normal people try not to engage with their kids as well for various reasons.
I
So
know.
you're just using your health reasons as the reason to not engage at the moment, and it's
Yeah,
pretty legitimate. It's not terrible. I mean, you're not doing it because you're a terrible person. It's legitimate.
yeah, exactly. And he's at the stage now, he's 3.5. He'll be 4 in March. But that he understands it now. He might say to me, "Are you gonna go up for a nap, mommy?" And he gets it, and he knows when I'm getting a bit tired, or he knows, oh, mommy's going up for a nap now. He knows that it's not strange to him, so
Children,
that helps as well.
yeah,
Hmm? Mm.
children are very smart. Does he ever ask you about your hand? Have you had a conversation with him about what's going on there?
He does. It actually initially he it definitely has affected him. you know I'd say about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, he started to get almost obsessed with my arm, and he'd get a bit angry with it. He'd come over and be like slapping it, pinching it, biting it. I'd be like, stop, and he'd be like, your sore hand, mommy, and just became a thing to him. So that was something my husband and I were a bit concerned about. He's clued in. He knows little things like I'm not able to zip up his coat before we go outside, and he gets pissed off. He's like, "Come on, zip up my coat. I know you have a sore handy, but come on." There's things that I can't do that all other moms can do. I've never been able to pick him up with two hands, for example. And he did go through a phase where he'd have both hands up, pick me up, mommy. So he's very clued in. He knows that there's something not right there. So he just gets annoyed and peed off with my hand and my arm. But he's coming around to that now.
Yeah. When he's pinching and biting your hand, can you feel it?
I can, yeah. Sensation is wrong when I say that, like someone could be hurting my shoulder, but to me, I feel like the pain is in my wrist. So like the pain receptors to the brain are all wrong. I'll give you an example. And early on in my recovery, when I was in my wheelchair, I remember going outside the front door of the hospital, and it was raining, and the raindrops hitting my left arm. It was as if every droplet was stabbing me. The pain, I was like, get me inside quick, cover me up. So the sensation, I can feel, but it's all wrong,
Mm,
if you know what I mean.
I know
So
exactly
yeah,
what you mean.
I'm screaming when he's pinching and biting me.
The shower for
Unfortunately.
me sometimes causes irritation on my left side.
Yeah,
And
me
when my
too.
wife is gentle, say if I'm driving the car and I have my left hand on the gear stick and she leans over, reaches over to put her hand on my hand, just very
Mhm.
gently. I can't do that. That's really painful. And
Mm.
he does it instinctively, and I rip my hand away, and it appears to be the meanest thing you could possibly do. But she's
Yeah.
starting to understand that it's not me being mean. It's seriously painful. But if you grab my hand with force, it doesn't hurt. It hurts
Mm.
when you do it gently. So
It's very strange. There's with me sometimes, and I mean, it sounds crazy. I have sometimes found myself going, "Where's my left arm?" Like I've said to Dave, I'm like, "Can you see my left arm? I can't find it." I mean, how crazy is that? But perception of where the limb is
yeah,
has always been a problem. Like I might wake up in the morning and my arm is under my bum or under my legs, and I wake up going, "Oh God, something is wrong. There's pain somewhere." But I don't know. My arm could be up there, it could be down here. Trying to figure out where the arm is in space, it's quite difficult for me.
yeah, wow.
So people laugh at me when I'm saying, "Did you see my arm? I can't find it." It's weird, but
So
yeah.
weird. Oh, we went to the beach yesterday in Melbourne. It's summer at the moment. And we had a quite a hot day. It was 35 or something, and uh, I sit under a beach umbrella and make sure that I don't get too much sun because I don't really enjoy getting sunburnt or any of that junk. Had a
Mhm.
swim, so I had my shoes off. Was sitting on the sand under the shade. It was fine. And then a friend of mine came to the beach, let me know that he was there. So I went to find him, and I went without shoes. And because it's the sand, I can normally walk on the sand fine without shoes. But
That's
little
impressive.
little pebbles, little pebbles of rocks on concrete feels like I just stepped on the most jagged rock and it was the size of the moon and it just destroys
Yeah,
my foot, is what it feels like. So
yeah,
I very much avoid it. However, I was walking on the sand and it was all fine. And I realized that my feet were getting hot, too hot for me to continue walking on. So I was trying to find a cooler place to step on. And when I came home about 2 hours later, I realized that on my left side, I actually had burnt my foot and had blisters underneath it, which I
yeah,
didn't notice at the time. I didn't feel the pain. I didn't know that that was burning to the extent that it was causing blisters. So I have that thing as well where hot doesn't register quickly enough, but
yeah.
cold is more painful than hot for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm similar enough. I'd often have the sink on upstairs, and I'd get it nice and hot for my good hand, but without realizing it, I might have my left baby finger in the water, and the pain is incredible, and it might just be maybe lukewarm, but to me it registers like I've just dipped my hand in lava.
Yeah.
It's just all the sensations are wrong.
How do you manage the shower?
Yeah, we had to get a walk-in shower when I came out of hospital because the previous one we had the most humongous step, which was very difficult, still would be stepping in and out of that without my foot splint on. So we basically got a walk-in shower and we did get a rail put onto the wall. So that's been a lifesaver. So I depended on that a lot in the early days, but it's there now just for a bit of security. But I don't need to hold on to it for dear life anymore.
Yeah, that's a relief when you don't have to do that anymore in the shower. I remember that as well, that phase of
Mm.
thinking I'm going to slip it and hit my head, especially where the craniotomy was. That was a real concern of mine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we had to get that gripped tile everywhere as well for safety. But I remember when I was in the rehab hospital praying for the day to come when I could stand in a shower. I had to sit down, like I'm sure you did at some stage as well, to have a shower in one of those horrible shower chairs that are in every hospital. But I never thought the day would come that I would be able to stand up and shower at the same time. So I often think of that in the shower, that I'm just grateful that I can do this. I genuinely never thought that day would come.
Yeah, I understand.
But
What
it's
about the water, adjusting the water and getting in? And I know that one of your sides is thinking this feels amazing. This is the perfect temperature. The other side's not
yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah, it's weird because I would say right down the middle of the body, the sensation on the left is just completely dulled compared to the right. So yeah, I do find myself having to adjust. It's perfect on the right, and ow, turn it down or turn it up on the left. So it's a bit of a longer process having a shower, really trying to balance out the temperature and sensation and all of that. But you get used to it.
Have you ever found yourself sweating on one side of the body and not the other? So I've done that where one side of my body is perspiring. Usually,
Mm,
I think it was my left side was perspiring and my right side wasn't.
interesting. No, I wasn't aware of that, but I look out for that now. Like with my feet, for example, my left foot, which is the affected side, I mean, it can be like a block of ice
Mm,
compared to my right foot, and that could be roasting hot.
mm.
So there's temperature can be very different. And same with my arms. Like at the minute, it's quite cold here in the room, and my left arm is freezing, whereas my right arm is normal. You know, but it's different.
That's so strange. I'm just aware of we're coming up to time, and I want to ask you what the hardest part of your journey has been so far.
I would say Bobby and missing those 7 months and coming home to a 7-month-old baby and just knowing when I was in hospital that my newborn baby is at home and that I wasn't at home with him, even though he was brought into me in my hospital bed for a few minutes. It wasn't the same. So that was definitely the hardest out of everything. I'd take paralysis and brain surgery over that.
Wow. And did you seek out counseling and support for coming to terms with the types of issues that you had? Because that's not what you expected until, you're 9 months into your pregnancy, everything, this is what's going to happen when I give birth, and that's what's going to happen when we come home, and this is how it's all going to go. And then that was all gone. Did you find you needed to get help to come to terms with that?
I didn't find I needed help, but I was advised to get help when I was in the rehab hospital. They referred me to a company called Headway. It's basically I don't know, would you have them in Australia? I
I've
don't
heard of
know.
them, yeah.
Yeah, so they're great. They basically offer all different services for anyone with a brain injury in Ireland. So I was referred to them, and I did see, and I still am seeing a fabulous lady there. She's a psychologist. So she's great. Initially, it's a real Irish thing. I was like, no, I'm grand. I don't need to go talk to anyone. But I totally see the benefits of therapy now, of sitting down and just talking about how I'm feeling. And as you said there, what I expected life would be like after having a baby versus the reality of what it is. So it's beneficial. So I now, initially, I was kind of in there going, oh, talk about how I'm feeling. I hate this. But now I actually look forward to going in and just talking. You come out feeling much lighter. And there's also kind of a group session that we go to in their cognitive behavioral therapy, I think it's called. And that's great. You're sitting in a room with people, everyone in there has been through the exact same experiences as myself. So we literally just bounce ideas off each other. And I find that a lot more helpful and impactful, really, than one on one. But it's great to have that service here in Ireland. It's
Yeah,
beneficial.
I was in counseling, I think at day 10 or something like that. Um,
Mhm.
but I had a good track record of being in counseling. I'm the kind of guy who I don't I don't do well with not resolving things in my mind. So
Mhm.
not that
Gotcha.
everything needs to be resolved, but I need to at least turn the cogs of the discussion on and get another perspective and express my perspective in a way that it doesn't get judged, etc. And I would recommend to everybody who has thought about it to just do it. And it's not about going and solving a particular issue or problem. It's just about going there, and then whatever comes from it, because you don't ever really know what you're going to get from it. Something just comes up and you realize, oh, I didn't think I was going to talk about that, or I didn't
Yeah,
expect to understand that or to learn that. And
it kind of it helps with your awareness. I often find myself going, "Oh yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
mm,
No, or I didn't see that. I didn't understand that, but I do now." It's it's great. It's very therapeutic, hence the name. But yeah, it's something I would really recommend anyone to do as well.
yeah, I also support stroke survivors through coaching. And some
Mm.
people, all they want to do is have their questions answered. So they'll send me, 3, 4, 5 questions, and all I'll do is answer those questions, whether it's me in a video chat scenario, whether it's one on one via Zoom like we are now, or whether it's just via a message through an app or whatever.
Hmm.
That ability for a stroke survivor to answer their questions rather than going and asking that question of a doctor is
Yeah,
is really changes the game, because they're not asking me medical questions. I'm not responding to medical questions. I'm responding to personal experience questions related to exactly
yeah,
what their experience is, rather than
that's what I was. Excuse me. That's what I was just thinking. I have two good friends who have had strokes as well. Well, who I met during the stroke journey,
mm,
and they're the best. I often would just send a message. God, has this happened to you?
mm,
And we kind of bitch with each other. Yeah, that happened to me. How did you handle it? And that's actually the best way to get advice, I find.
mm,
And you can't beat knowing that someone has experienced what you have experienced.
yeah.
I find that very comforting. So I talk and I engage with those two friends of mine a lot.
And
And
it
we have
sounds
stroke talk.
and it sounds like why you jumped at the chance to be on the podcast when I sent you
Mhm.
a request.
Absolutely. Yeah. As I said earlier, it's if you can help one person, I often think of someone being in hospital, upset, feeling afraid and alone. Like how amazing would it be for someone now to listen to you and I talking here? It would have to give hope to a person. So I think you can't beat that.
And it does, Ruth. I get messages every day, and it gets downloaded at least 3,000 times a month, this podcast now.
Mm.
So
Wow.
it reaches a lot of people. A lot of people listen. And you would
Mm.
think that after 130 episodes that they're all starting to sound the same. They're not.
Yeah.
Every episode is different, even though we're talking about stroke all the time, because every human is different. Every lesson that they've learned has been learned in a different way, for different reasons. So I
Mhm.
think I think there's really an ideal way, and we're blessed to have a technology that wasn't available even 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And 5 years ago, nobody really paid attention to it. And that's when I started my podcast. It's been about 5 years. At the beginning, the episodes were few and far between because I was unwell. Um,
Mhm.
but in the last 5 years, there's at least another 3 or 4 podcasts related to stroke that I'm aware of.
Mm.
And some people have told me that they were like you, very early stages of stroke, lying down on a hospital bed or even at home and Googling stroke podcast, and then bang, they come up. And their prayers have been answered, because all of a sudden they start to feel like you and I feel, which is, okay, I'm not alone. And people understand
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah, I wish I had found you in this podcast in the early days. I could totally see the benefit that would have been. So it's brilliant. Fair play to you for doing these podcasts. Great.
Thank you for being a guest on the Recovery After Stroke podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for
And
having me.
I know you want to connect with people on Instagram. So, what
Mm.
is your Instagram handle? I'm going to, of course, put it in the show notes for people to find easily. But where would people find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram account is Ruthie_Carroll 84.
CARROLL ROLL84, Ruthie_Carroll84.
Yep, that's exactly it.
All the best on a amazing ongoing recovery. Enjoy your family and give yourself heaps of time to get better. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks a million, Bill.
Discover how to heal your brain after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com. Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.